Hello and welcome to the Pre-Chiro podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ben Glass, and today we're making a professional chiropractor connection with Dr. Lee Newman. Dr. Lee, can you get us started by just introducing yourself and reflecting on that moment in life when you decided you wanted to become a chiropractor? What was it that attracted you to this path? What was it that really just made you want to become a chiropractor?
Well, thanks for having me. And when we spoke briefly about prepping for this, I got to think back and build that. And so, I was born into it. So I'm one of those multi-generational. My father was a 1959 graduate of Logan College. He decided to become a chiropractor in the mid 50s. I just turned 62 months ago, so I was born in 63. And so he was already in practice. And so I grew up in it. And so, I was the weird kid in kindergarten and grade school that got singled out. And the nurse knew not to give me aspirin or whatever the drug of the day was that they were dispensing. And so I was always kind of outcast isn't the right word, but isolated out. Even like in 10th grade in chemistry class, I had slightly beyond a regular relationship with the chemistry teacher, and who knew me and my family, and he wanted to know why I didn't want to become a real doctor, or the academic advisor in high school who had to sign off on a program that I wanted to do, and she gave me a hard time. And so I always knew that I wanted to do it. I joke, but it is true that after Little League didn't work out the way that I had hoped that it would in 1975, as I become part of the senior generation, I was always the Uber kid. So it's humorous to me because in my mind, I'm still the 23-year-old that graduated and was in practice, or the 20-year-old that entered Life College in January of 1983, which was now 40 years ago. And so even I wasn't designed to jump back and forth, but if you're a prospective student, if you're thinking about becoming a chiropractor, my second recommendation is to really pick the right school. And so you have a bunch of choices. I'm not even here to give you a recommendation, but based on, what you want to do in your career, I would look for the best education possible, even if that meant further travels than less, or however, whatever the inconvenience is. As always, I would look for the best opportunity. And so I always knew that I wanted to become a chiropractor. And again, just for some educational history, in September of 19 in September of 1983, they changed the prerequisite requirements to enter chiropractic college. And so it would have been my natural time to start. And so I accelerated my senior year of high school. And this is still a doable path, but not really well understood. I was able to have all 60 pre-chiropractic required credits 14 months after I graduated high school. And so I took classes at the university my senior year of high school. It's what the academic advisor had to sign off on that gave me the hard time. And then classes that summer, classes the whole regular academic year, and then the second summer. And so by the August, 14 months after I graduated high school, I had completed the pre-chiropractic requirements. And so when I entered life, I was the second youngest. We were also the first group of students that were 14 quarters. And so you should know that that was 12 quarters at some point. My brother was 3 years ahead of me. Oh, he's older. He was 3 years earlier than me. And so he graduated in 12 quarters. And so that was my educational pathway. Does that address your question?
Somewhat. As a pre-chiropractic student, before you got to chiropractic school, you were doing all these prerequisites for college as a high school senior. I'm curious, having come from a chiropractic family, like that was your educational path. What was your chiropractic path leading up to chiropractic school? How did you prepare yourself? Did your dad or your older brother encourage you to do anything specific, or would you encourage students today, high school or college students, to do anything specific to gain a better context, to deepen their conviction in this big decision that they're making, so that they're clear on why they're going to become a chiropractor?
Sure. And so, as I said earlier, picking your school is like the second most important thing to be thinking about right now. And so that begs the question of what do I think number one is? And for me, that's getting a real understanding of what chiropractic is and what it is that we offer our patients, our communities, our cities, our states, our countries, the world, and really all vertebrates, right? And so I think that even today, whatever 130 years, whatever it is since 1895, it's poorly understood. And so even amongst students, right, it's rare to ask a non-chiropractor or perhaps even an employee in a chiropractic office, what is chiropractic, and get an answer that involves the nervous system. And sorry about that. Well, I think that there are many other schools of thought. I think that the real distinction that we offer healthcare and the world is that of the detection and adjustment of the subluxation. And so allowing the body to function the way that it was designed to connect the brain body, if that's your language, on a strictly, I was able to review many of your podcast videos here, and it was enheartening. That's not the right word, but it was a super positive experience for me to see other docs speaking to the prospective chiropractic students about the philosophy, science, and art. And I think all three of those, it's a triune, three things, and all three of those are important. But to see docs that are literally 30 years younger than me, 35 years younger than me, to be speaking these same points and maybe in a more persuasive way, like I like that. In terms of like making the decision of becoming a chiropractor, I think that if you're exposed to it and understand what chiropractic is, and that calls to you as both a mission of service as well as a pathway to be wildly successful in business, I think it's another, I would challenge any high school senior that entering any academic program of any sort, what is your career path? And so I like to joke about, the poetry degrees from Penn. And, I would strongly encourage everybody to attend the Coursera course. You can do the advanced, the master's poetry course online for free. And I think the information is tremendous. But how do those graduates then go into the field and be of service and make money? And so at some point today, we could perhaps, where my strength really is, I have strength in the philosophy, science, and art, but I also think that understanding how the business works and how in exchange to being of service to people who are dying, sometimes not as slowly as we might think, but either slowly or faster, to be in service of those people, like how do we make the business work and become a winner as well? I don't want to hog up all the time. And
Yeah, just to keep building context for you, stage one.
Pardon me?
Can you do the swipe down on your phone and try and hit the do not disturb? Because I think being an entrepreneur, you keep getting notifications.
How's that?
Yeah, can you do the do not disturb on your cell phone? You know how to do that? I was mentioning that because you're such a great entrepreneur, you're getting notifications and people reaching out to you at all moments here. It's interrupting our feed. So just to keep building context, we've introduced them. If you swipe down, you'll see a half moon shape.
Yeah, okay.
hit the
There we
half
go.
moon.
Got it. Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
You're welcome. So,
You know, when I
all right.
went to college,
So I broke the word
I
innate up
never
into
did.
your inner state. That's your.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I was just going to comment that I never completed any school
I broke the
assignment on a
word up
computer.
innate. So if we're trying to help build understanding of the different skill trees, and I would love for you to include entrepreneur. So I broke innate up into your inner state. That's your inner scientist, thinker, artist, teacher, entrepreneur. So developing that science, philosophy, art, business, and communication internal skill set. How would you unpack that for a prospective student to set them on a trajectory where they're valuing the communication and the entrepreneurial mindset and developing those important skills that are going to allow them to really reach the people with their philosophy and art?
Well, I, I'm not sure if this is going to be directly responsive to that, but I came up with 8 suggestions for the person considering chiropractic college as well as those just starting the journey. And so if I miss out on a topic that you'd like to hear about, you can ask. And so I think the first suggestion is to get adjusted and to get adjusted regularly to be a chiropractic patient. And so I've been adjusted since the week I was born. I'm now currently, as I sit here, 2.5 weeks since my last adjustment and noticing it. And like when I'm done with this call, I could be going out to get adjusted. And so really experience it as a patient. And in fact, I think lots of chiropractic students come to chiropractic because they were the miracle cure themselves. They either had an illness or an injury, and typically they failed elsewhere, and the chiropractor helped them. But there are others that got, that are making it, that have never been adjusted, and that would be a mistake to kind of enter a profession without having that viewpoint. Second is to experience as many different techniques as possible. So even for the prerequisite students, the early quarter students, and certainly students that are entering into clinic, is to expose yourself to as many techniques as possible to get your bag of tricks so that you can service a greater number of people with your own 2 hands. 3, right? And again, even if you're in high school, and I know hundreds of chiropractors that would love for you to show up. The recommendation is work in a chiropractic office. And so if you were a high school senior and you could be in my office at 2:30 in the afternoon, I could give you 5 days a week. And I know hundreds of other chiropractors that could give you at least 4. And so working in a chiropractic office will give you a real life experience and the ability to see what really happens to our patients one after the other on an ongoing basis. 4 is for the students, the early students, start clinic as soon as possible. Get your hands on as many people as possible. Join technique clubs. Whatever they allow you to do hands-on, do that. And then with that is to finish clinic as quickly as possible, right? Just as I interview docs to work for me and clients, one of the questions I'll ask is, did you finish on average, ahead, or behind your average classmate in clinic? And so really bringing all of the book smarts with your clinical skills and your human skills, our compassion, our ability to interact, the doctor-patient relationship, and really learning how to, it's of 2 minds. We want to be empathetic. We want to be able to bond with people. And then we have to have some ego as well to where we can lead people to what's best for them. And so learning the people skills is probably the greatest thing that I learned from my father hanging out in his office. He wasn't really system oriented, and it certainly wasn't documentation. It was adjusting. He had great hands, but it was just the taking care of all the different types of people that you're going to interact with on an everyday basis. And that led me that when I was in clinic at Life University, which was merely Life College at the time, and we had the clinic in a poorer neighborhood in downtown Atlanta, I would, in terms of finishing early, I would be there at 6 in the morning so I could be first on the sign-in list. And, I also became the bouncer in the clinic if any vagrants happened to come into the clinic, which frequently did. So finish clinic as early as possible. 6, line up an internship or whatever they call it at your school, the Life Peak program. Line up an internship that bolsters your career, right? What is it that you need to be exposed to learn, to have access to, that's going to further you in your career? And so again, if you're already in chiropractic college, you're certainly within 2 years, maybe 2.5 at the outset, of being able to be in that position. 7 is take the board reviews when they're offered. So another thing that I'll ask and I'm looking for is you should have a license, and this is number 8. Figure out how to have a license in your hand or digitally as quickly as possible. And so my star graduate on this point, Dr. Shannon, she was one of my associates that went on and purchased a practice from me over 20 years ago and continues to this day to have one of the largest practices in Pittsburgh. She graduated on a Saturday from Logan in 1999. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday had her license, right? And so, like, having that initiative, you want to be focused on where you want to take your career. And at that point, that's the next step.
So that's a lot to unpack there for me to respond to directly, but I'm just wondering if you could kind of unpack what it's like, the life of a chiropractor, what it's like to be in practice, what you're observing in the people that come into your practice, what's the type of experience that you've designed for them to have, just so that we can keep building context of what practicing chiropractic looks like and feels like.
Sure. And I want to start with like what's happened during, the COVID pandemic era. And so my biggest takeaway from the COVID era is the 100% reinforcement of that we live lives inside our own minds. And so all the success psychology stuff, I guess this is another recommendation, right? I'll go back to As a Man Thinketh, not BJ, although that's good too, but William Allen's and Think and Grow Rich and Robbins, Anthony Robbins, or whatever other motivator like that speaks to you. There's lots of gems in that stuff, but being able to envision both a career, like educationally, but then this is another thing that I felt that I was probably weak on, actually. Like I knew I was going to graduate in June of 1986, like in the 70s. And so I was always focused on June of 86, but I hadn't really thought beyond that. And so I would encourage you to think it all the way through, even to like, what do you want life to be like at 60? And so being a chiropractor has afforded me everything. And so in the early years, right, I came out, I was in practice 5 weeks after I graduated. I worked 5.5 days a week for 14 years. And, ultimately, well, my path was I got to 50 visits super quick. I kind of got stuck at 50 visits. At that point, I started working with coaches. Dr. Chuck Gibson, who just had a birthday, turned 88, who's still out there, is one of my personal heroes. He really taught me how to like bring chiropractic into how to bring the business alive. And ultimately, I was able to grow from 50 visits a week to 500 visits a week with a second doc. I've had other coaches along the way. Dr. Noel Lloyd in Seattle, who's still out there at 74, really taught me how to properly work with associates and satellite offices. I've actually gone on to partner and then sell 16 offices to my associates. And so one of my legacies, right, is still to this day in Western Pennsylvania, there's roughly, I don't know the exact number, but at least 15 offices right now as we speak that are delivering chiropractic in Western Pennsylvania. And so certainly those docs that have owned their own practices for many, many years continue to make it happen. But somewhere deep in the souls of those practices, my DNA, strains of my DNA exist. And so in terms of legacy, it's one of the reasons that I did what I did, leading back to, again, mission. And here's another assignment wherever you are. If you're a senior in high school, if you're a junior in high school, if you're in the middle school, and you're thinking about becoming a chiropractor, here's an easy assignment for you to think about. Is I encourage you to walk into the nearest pharmacy from wherever you are and to go back and to get a look at all of the prescriptions waiting to be picked up. And my observation is wherever you are, and think about that, all the different pharmacies, in the supermarkets, in the Walmarts, in the Sam's Club, everywhere, they're going to deliver at least 500 prescriptions today, right? And so this isn't about necessarily bashing pharmaceuticals. I'm just asking how many of those people would also do better under our care. And if you can really understand that that's the power of chiropractic and that's what calls to you, then the why sometimes makes the how much easier. And the grind. I remember my 48 months in chiropractic college, right? And so, I encourage all of you that are considering that and that are in that is to hit it out of the park and get out and start helping us to serve the other 95% of the people that we're not reaching.
Yeah, and you use this word associateship a number of times, and I'm just wondering. I've seen that you've developed education around how chiropractors can basically nurture their associates to have a rewarding relationship with them, and so it's a win-win-win. Can you kind of unpack that for the prospective student or current student? The benefits of associateships, the experiences that.
Um, yeah, and so I think that it goes back to, how does the business of chiropractic work? And so in the field of what's called chiropractic business management, I'm a chiropractic business coach or business manager. So there are docs that are out that have their own practices. They pay me a monthly fee and I coach them with systems and everything that can happen. Right. And so in that field of business management, there is a vast body of knowledge that each of us kind of contribute to, and then everybody else takes it and kind of puts their own spin on it. But one of my unique principles I call chiropractic algebra. So for those of you out there that love math like I did, right, this is the basic fundamental unit of chiropractic business, and it's going to relate to associates, right, is the number of new patients that you see multiplied by how often you see them, which in chiropractic we call patient visit average, PVA. Sometimes it's referred to as retention. Those two numbers multiplied together equal the total number of visits that you will see, which is one of the top key statistics in a chiropractic business. How many people do you see? And if you take that number and multiply it by what you collect per visit, you will have grand revenue of the business. And so my chiropractic algebra is new patients times patient visit average times office visit average equals collections. And so those are the three areas necessary to become successful in practice. And so when I work with associates, right, it's about developing all of the clinical skills, right? How do we intake new patients? How do we discuss patient histories, physical exam, taking x-rays, interpreting x-rays, marking x-rays, creating listings to adjust, communicating back to the patient, getting patient commitments, delivering all that service, communicating during the delivery of that service, and then ultimately having conversation with people about why being a lifetime chiropractic patient makes sense. And if you do everything right, right, like 1 in 5 can end up down that path. And while that might be discouraging, if you had 30, 40, 50 a year, right? I'm now entering year 38, which is unbelievable in my mind, right? It starts to add up. And so again, being of service in a way that makes business sense. And so when I work with associates, we're developing all the clinical stuff as well as how do you get new patients, right? And frankly, new patients is the number one challenge for any chiropractic practice until it isn't, right? And so generically speaking, I think that you should have 30 new patients a month, one per calendar day. Like today's the 2nd, so you should have 2 in May, right? Patient visit average, it's an interesting question. You know, I would ask a prospective associate, how many visits do you think that your typical average patient needs in their lifetime? And so again, this is a measurement of whether I'm a match with a prospective associate or not. And I'll hear answers, from 6 to 10, up into the hundreds or even more than that. And so just as, if you were to ask me, my answer is my average patient needs about 40 visits plus 12 to 24 times their life expectancy. And so working it backwards, like a brand new patient, typically with the typical presenting symptoms, positive physical findings, state of their spine on x-ray and interference to the nervous system, needs somewhere around 40 visits for maximum improvement. Some might need much more, others might need less, but somewhere around that number. And then once or twice a month for the rest of their life. And, I think that that's actually, it's not even reasonable. I think that it's necessary being a human. And so back to COVID, not only do we live life inside our own heads, but those of us, and so the ones that kept their heads, focused on their practice grew. And the ones that didn't, the chiropractors didn't. And, right, we're like, I like to say, we're the most bricky and mortarous business that are left. We can't adjust people through the computer, even if Dr. Sid said he did so on the television, right? And who actually touched more humans in the last 3 years than the busy chiropractor, right? And so it's an interesting thing to think about. I might be going a little off a field here, but it's an interesting thought. And so when I work with associates, it's about all of that. How do we market better? How do we communicate? How do we build PVA? How do we collect for our work? How do we become better technicians? How do we put our results on display? Right? And so all of that.
Yeah, and a lot of this conversation is about just planting seeds. You're developing new terminology that you're exposing students to that they may go through chiropractic school and never hear. So them hearing it before they go to chiropractic school, is there any way that you can maybe give them a couple of little progressions of where to start and how to progress slowly as they build up and prepare to either go into chiropractic school and make the most of their experience while they're there? What do you think students should really be spending a lot of time on when it comes to chiropractic algebra and the business and crystallizing their vision or developing those communication skills or developing their theoretical models of how they're going to attract more patients to their practice? Like, where can they begin, and what are some things that they can do and practice while they're in school or even before they get to school? Specifically, I'm encouraging students to start their own pre-chiropractic club on their college or high school campus as a model, basically a vehicle to practice these types of skills. So maybe you can give encouragement to those club representatives or club creators.
I think it's like anything else, right? If you decide that, so if you were to start a new, let's say that you never golfed before and you decided that you wanted to take up golfing, but it could be anything, right? What would you do? And so you would start searching on the internet. You would look for peer groups. You would look for professionals that are teachers. You would go out and attempt and try to fail. And so, I think all of that applies as well. I think that both the pre-chiropractic clubs, I think, are great. I still think that, you know, we've always lived in this kind of weird vacuum where like mainstream medicine wants to call us complementary and alternative, but the real, complementary and alternative energy healers and sleeping under a pyramid, Not that I'm anti that per se. They would call us more mainstream. And so we live kind of on this verge of both worlds. And so I think that again, having a peer group is killer. I think exposing yourself to whatever you can find in terms of your education. My comment was going to be business wise. I think that you should be focused on academics for the majority of your effort up until you get to clinic. Not that you should slack off on your academics, but at that point, you're kind of through part two and through the basic sciences and the heavy hours. I would just like also to comment that I believe that my 1983 to 1986 chiropractic education at Life College in Marietta, Georgia, for whatever negatives might have existed, was the best chiropractic education ever offered. We had first class anatomy. We had exposure to, the most techniques in any college. The technique, both the professors or docs teaching technique and in the clinic were super helpful. I personally got to work with Dr. Larry Webster for 18 months in clinic, which was a life-changing opportunity. And so while I don't know that life has done everything the way that I would do it, I would just like to acknowledge that I do think that my education was superior. And so being able to expose yourself to all of the philosophy, the science, and the art, and when you have that in foundation as you start to enter clinic and actually need new patients and need to communicate to your new patients what they need, is the time to start integrating those business models. And again, I think that you could start early if you were working in a chiropractic office. And so even as a high school student, you could go out and support the doc in a spinal screening, in a talk to people at work, in creating social media content, in being their Instagram ambassador, or whatever the channels are now that, like, I know about Instagram, but like whatever the stuff is that I don't even know about. Right. And so I think that they can be of great value communicating to the under 25 crowd, and anyone with a spine needs us.
And if you could give like a creative project, an independent study capstone project for the prospective student who has maybe 3 months before they start chiropractic school, what would you encourage them to do? Or if you were their professor, what are some options that they can spend 3 to 6 months doing to crystallize whatever it is that they're interested in, to go deeper with whatever they're passionate about?
Well, this is here's what struck me when you asked that, right? And so uh, I guess this is for the not faint of heart, right? A 3-month project, a capstone, is to actually make more than a business plan, but like the 30-year business plan, right? And so I'm now year 38. Year 30 is only going to be 2053, right? And so while that might sound like it's never going to happen, I was in practice before there were computers, right? It's going to happen. And so I would work on your 2053 or even 2060 life plan, right? And so this isn't necessarily really about the money, but like anything else, right? If I were to ask you, the 18-year-old that's a senior in high school, that's going to be graduating in the next 6 to 8 weeks, whatever it is that you decide that you want to do, right? One of the questions that I want to ask is, how much money will you have at any age, let's say 60? And with whatever you answer, right? Whatever you answer, does it change the actions that you take along the way? And so for the chiropractor, it's a pretty wide range, right? And I think it's one of the exciting things. Again, I always want the dog to wag the tail. In exchange for servicing, 30 new patients a month for 30 years, seeing 200 patient visits a week for 30 years, being a good steward of all the money that we touch, saving, paying off debt, investing, how much at the end of that? And, I think that the number is exciting. And for the brand new graduate 30 years out, having a $10 million objective or goal, I think is doable. And so if you could really craft a document, how do you go from an 18-year-old senior in high school to a $10 million net worth chiropractor who spent 30 years changing people's lives? And what does that look like at year 18? What does it look like at year 3? It would be really a capstone piece, knowing that your actual path would probably deviate, but at least having a map can guide you. How many pre-chiropractic clubs do you know exist?
Not enough.
I bet.
Just a handful at this moment that I'm aware of. I know that each campus has their own alumni network that hosts and sponsors events to offer information sessions to basically introduce the chiropractic pathway to whoever wants to come to their office, but never has the profession like actually focused itself on the prospective student audience and tried to actually market and brand the profession to be truly what it is authentically to the high school or college student. That's kind of what excites me about this project, is it really hasn't been done before. And our profession is so rich with resources. People like you that nobody really even has an awareness of is doing all this work behind the scenes to help all these different doctors. And you know, you were very valuable to me when I was a student and you came in and introduced chiropractic algebra. I was like, I still remember that class, and that was 12 years ago. So it's like, if I could just connect these people such as yourself to the prospective student, I just think it would ease their path a little, or at least pull back the curtain, the veil, and allow them to see like, okay, this is what I'm really looking at. This is not easy, but it's worth it. And if I just dedicate myself to it, then I can chart my own course, you know, on my own terms, being aware of what's available to me. So I appreciate you playing along today. At the end of the day, I question. I'll throw this last couple questions at you. What do you think about pre-chiropractic and its ability to potentially change this next generation of incoming students? Its ability to maybe establish a presence of chiropractic in health centers on college campuses, or at least have guidance counselors acknowledging chiropractic in the conversations that they have, because they have pre-chiro students giving them materials and educating them, or teachers in the kinesiology, pre-med biology departments sharing chiropractic in the curriculum when they teach anatomy or physiology?
I think that it would be great, you know, and I don't really know what the current status is, but like I would imagine that it is, you know, nothing, and perhaps are students even designated as pre-chiropractic, right? Does that line of education even exist? Like you might self-identify as, right, but you're really just a science student or whatever it is, and I don't know that you're going to get institutional help to make a pre-chiropractic curriculum. You know, probably everybody that do you know, like I would assume that just about everybody that enters chiropractic school at this point has an undergraduate degree, right? I would assume that. And so
Yeah,
like
just like historically, if you finish your
you
if you finish your prerequisites, if you finish your prerequisites, you don't need an undergraduate degree. But in certain states, if you want to practice, you need an undergraduate degree. And about 5 years ago, they changed it so that any kind of undergraduate degree in art history is eligible to apply to certain chiropractic programs. So we have students now coming in with no science background. And then we also have other.
I think though that like in Florida, you need to have the BS before you even enter chiropractic college. But all I'm saying, like the vast majority of chiropractic students have an undergraduate degree, but yet there's no official like pre-chiropractic degree or even curriculum. And so like, you know, that would be perhaps a natural extension, is trying to work with anybody in academia to create a template, like here's the suggested curriculum, and, you know, bounce that off. But like how much of chiropractic education is geared perhaps in a way that you and I might not even agree with? like more of a physical medicine
Yeah,
program.
my premise. Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. I totally hear what you're saying. I think that I've done a lot of legwork to develop that pre-chiropractic program, maybe as a certificate of achievement. I am going to have to go and work with undergraduate institutions and high schools, which is, going to be a voyage and a journey in itself. But that's the mission that I'm on, is bringing a pre-chiropractic track, an actual like subset of a major. So maybe you're a bio major with a focus on pre-chiropractic studies, and then creating a cohesive enough curriculum that by the time they get to chiropractic school, maybe they're not taking an MCAT type test, but they've gone through 100 different experiences, exposures, and express themselves in ways that demonstrate they know what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I strongly support you. Right. So I just want to define, just as a perhaps end statement, of my vision of what the thriving chiropractic practice looks like. And so, I think that the individual chiro should aspire to see 200 patient visits a week. All right. To a large extent. Why? Because I said so and I'm the authority. But there are many, many reasons, and it can be done. There are docs that, want to see 1,000 a week, and I don't think that that's necessarily necessary. But 200 a week makes you a warrior in the clinical fight, which is my number one issue. But it's also, on 50 weeks, 10,000 visits a year. And so it is a dynamic business model on a $65 office visit, which is probably about average, right? It's 10,000 visits. We're all good at the 10,000 math. That would be $650,000. And regardless of whatever chiropractic business you're talking about forever and ever and ever, I want you to try to think about and create at least a 50%, 50, or less overhead. So collections are not what the chiropractor makes, because we have to pay for rent and staff and supplies and advertising and electricity and everything else. And so to try to goal for a 50% overhead, and so on $650,000, that's still a $325,000 profit, which is the business model. At that point, right, it makes sense to hire an associate, right? And this is from the senior doc viewpoint. And so 2 docs doing 300 a week, right, which is 15,000 visits at $70 a visit, is $1 million. And that's kind of the vision, in 2023, 300 a week, 2 docs, 3 CAs, doing $1 million. And so we're helping people, we're doing it in an organized way, and we're making money. And that's my vision of a chiropractic business.
Well, Dr. Lee, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share with prospective and current students. Can you maybe just reference some of the project or programs that you've developed?
Sure.
And if people want to connect with you, what the best places to connect with you are?
Yeah, so you can connect with me directly by email. It's a trick email, drLeeNewman@gmail. You can find me on Facebook at Lee Newman. I have a free Facebook group with a bunch of resources. If you're in practice and want to discuss practice growth or associates, you can connect with me. I'm out there in the circles. Even if you're thinking about becoming a chiropractor and anything I said struck you and you'd like to have a one-to-one conversation or text or email or whatever, I really want you to encourage you to reach out. We seldom hear from your peers. I would love to get 1 email a month from a high school senior asking whatever questions that you have about what it would mean if you chose to become a chiropractor, or more, but like